and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to what's going to be historical Spa and the Jaguar XJR-9. Obviously it's one of the vintage cars, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the aspects of tuning and the setup. I also want to look at a technique that I've been using just recently, which combines both the paddle shifters and the sequential gearbox. So if you're not if you haven't even tried using the heel and toe method, which I've produced in one of my last videos about the big secret, I certainly think gear changing using the sequential gearbox is faster than using the paddle shifts in cars that use the H pattern gearbox. But if you're not used to changing down through the gears, there's no sequential shifting, which means that there's no you're having to balance the throttle as you come off the clutch, and if you're not used to doing that, you end up just locking out the rear axle. I forget what it's called, synchromesh or something like that. But anyway, if you're no good at doing that, this is a way to combine the quick shifting of the gearbox with the downshifting from the paddles and a little bit between, but we're not going to be using the clutch pedal at all during this video. I'll talk through all my setup and everything for the car, because there is quite a little bit to learn through this video. So let's get on with it. Let's take a little look. We've got the car. So let's take a little look at the circuit itself. It's an amazing circuit, the historic circuit, and in all fairness, having driven it the past couple of weeks, I've really grown to love this circuit. It really does flow at high speeds, and I can only imagine back in the day this was an absolutely amazing circuit to drive at, but some of the near-death experiences that you probably had back in those days, it was probably a heart-in-your-mouth sort of track to be driving, but certainly adrenaline rush, that's for sure. So let's get it loaded up. I'll load up my fastest lap so that you can get some ideas on the difference using the different gearboxes. I'm not sure if this is currently the fastest lap in the world using the Jaguar XJR. I'll have a look at that. But it's certainly a competitive lap. So here we are. I'll leave all the HUD display on during this video so that you can see what's exactly happening with the pedals. I've tried to get the camera angle so you can see what's happening with the pedals as well. I've not got the ability to film everything, as I'm just using the one camera, which is my iPhone 8 Plus. So yeah, let's have a little look at this setup. Now the tyre pressures, as always, I have tried the hard tyre just to see if it was better at top speed, but you just lose far too much grip through the corners. So tyre pressure in general, in these old historic cars, I would really recommend, when you're looking at top line speed, trying to get the tyre pressure as high as you can without losing too much traction. And these are absolutely maxed out, they are. The brake pressure again is always going to be something that's personal to yourself. There's only one really heavy braking section on this circuit, which comes just before the start finish line, and it really is just a case of trying not to lock out through the brakes. So the brake pressure is right the way down at 80% here. Obviously the brake balance as well, which through that very last corner, which is only the corner that really suffers with brake balance, we're really just trying to get the car to rotate, but not rotate too much. So that's why the brake pressure is where it is, and the brake balance. Obviously the ducts, we've closed those out to try and get as much straight line speed as possible, and we're running no downforce at all, and just the longitudinal weight bias right towards the front of the car to aid through the braking phase of that very last corner. You start angling it more towards the rear, and it doesn't really help the car too much through the acceleration phases. but it hinders through the braking phases. The casters, I left those exactly where they are, and the front camber, as I mentioned before, we're trying to get maximum top end speed out of this car because there's so much of this track is at full speed. We're almost flat out, I'd say for about 75% of the lap. The accelerator is at full chat, so we're just increasing camber reduces top speed. That's all you need to remember really. Ride height is as low as it'll go without bottoming out at any point, and the springs are set at maximum just to aid in making the car feel more agile and to reduce any bottoming out throughout the lap. Rear camber, as you can see, absolutely zero camber on the rear wheels. We're just trying to get maximum speed, and like I said, increasing camber increases grip but reduces the top speed. Ride height again is just, we've got a little bit of a rake on the car. Obviously there is aero working and we're just trying to keep it from bottoming out, but we want it at its lowest centre of gravity as possible. And the spring rate again is maxed out at the rear. Toe angle, completely taking that off, and the steering ratio, as you know, I'm using the McLaren wheel, so we want very little in the way of locking. You know, that's full lock. I don't want to be letting go of the wheel and trying to twist it. I just want to go from lock to lock, and that's where we're at. Anti-roll bars again are very stiff, maxed out at the rear as well, I think. Yeah. So just trying to get the car absolutely solid. It's all about straight line speed, this setup. The dampers, I think I've lifted the bump stops at some point and lowered them, and again I've adjusted a lot of these to try and adjust them in line with the front suspension and rear suspension. They're very hard settings. I did try the bump transitions at soft and at hard and settled on a in between. And yeah, I just set these as hard as I could set them really. And then I started to work the way down. I think 1640, yeah, it goes barely any more than that. So just getting about 75% difference or 25% difference, something like that, between the two figures, bump and rebound. But always, like I've mentioned before, time and time again, rebound will always be harder than bump across the board. Radiator, close that out as much as possible, and the braking again is just to try and get the car to rotate in that last corner. We also don't want it to rotate too much. I've tried it at 0 to help the braking, but it just turns the car far too much. Through that last corner. It's all about the last corner, the braking. The final drive and the gear ratios are hugely important. All these gear ratios will need looking at and adjusting, and fourth gear is very important because at one point we'll change down, but I'm not going to lift off the accelerator at all when I change down. I'll change down through the gearbox. And there's no synchromesh, remember, so I'll just go from fourth straight down to fifth, straight down to fourth gear. I'm not going to take my foot off the accelerator when I do so. It's just going to be a straight drop, no clutch at all. And then I'll take a tiny lift through one of the corners and we'll be flat out again. So yeah, very important, the gear ratios. Obviously there's no traction control, there's no ABS, and the mapping's at full whack on the fuel. The differentials, adjusted these probably slightly, but I can't remember where they were at their original settings. But yeah, I always remember that if you increase the ramp angle on the power, like towards 90, it'd be just far easier to handle coming out of some of the corners. You get less oversteer, and you come down right the way down here, and you get a lot of oversteer coming out of the corners. It'd be very hard to get the power down. So just a happy medium in between there. And again, the coast ramp angle, I just find this doesn't work particularly well in project cars too. Sometimes it has the effect you're looking for, and sometimes it has a different effect. But I sometimes think if I reduce it down to about 20, I'll get less braking oversteer. The car will be more tending towards understeer with a lower ramp angle, and the car will rotate a lot more with a higher ramp angle through the braking phase only. The preload, again, the lower this is, the more understeer you'll get, and the higher it is, the more oversteer you get when you're off throttle. And I think I'd left the clutch where it was. I did try the viscous LSD, adding that. Don't think it made much difference, so that was how we left the setup. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be using the sequential gearbox to change up through the gears, but I'm going to be coming down through the gears using the paddle shifts, apart from one corner where I will use the gearbox. Because obviously once let's say for example we've gone up to third gear, we've gone through the fourth gear and into fifth gear, and in one of the corners we're going to come down on the paddle shifts to third gear, so 2 clicks down and we're in third gear. So then we're going to go back up through the gears. We're going to have to go from fifth down to fourth gear and then up to fifth gear. And again, on the start finish straight, when we're starting the lap, we're going to be in second gear. We're going to go up through the gears, and then we're going to have to come down through the gears using the paddle shifts. Just remember, take a look at what I'm doing, and also take a look at the steering through some of the corners. Some of the corners I'll be very careful through the steering, very fine movements. You'll almost, especially when you through the high speed section, there'll be really small increments that I'll be wanting to move the steering wheel to try and get as little resistance through the wheel as possible. And through one of the corners I'll be having to be very fine to keep the speed going through the corner. I want to scrub as little speed as possible, but through some of the corners I'll be very, very aggressive through the steering to try and get the car to turn in, to try and get it to grip. You will not make the corners being smooth. You'll see which corners they are, and you'll see me juddering with the wheel like this just to try and get the car to turn. It's a different technique of steering, but it does have an effect on how the car gets through the corner. So try have a try out, see what I mean through the lap, and I'll leave everything up on the screen so you can see my footwork, and hopefully you can see through the little gap there, and if you can't, I do apologise for that. So let's take a little look at the lap. I'll discard any changes just about to where it was, and let's have a look at setting a fast lap, and then we'll have a look at driving around the circuit. So using the gearbox, I'll put the full telemetry up on the screen so you can see what's happening. So after a few laps, just to get my eye in, I've started again. So the gearbox is in second gear, and I've just changed down with the paddle shifts. So quick flick of the wrist into second gear, and then up into third, into fourth, and we're going to stay in fourth all the way through here. Totally take your hands or your foot off the brake. You see the little flick through there, just trying to be really quick with the wheel, and just rewind that and have a look how quick I am with the wheel through that section. Coming up to the braking zone here, just foot back on the pedal and into third gear with the paddles. So as you see, as we come out of here, just fighting with the wheel a bit. I'm going to go from fourth back into fourth on the manual shifter. As soon as we're up into fifth gear, there's going to be a huge spell here where we're not going to even have our foot over the brake pedal. In fact, looking at my brake pedal now, you can see that it's not even anywhere near ready for braking, and it's just trying to be really smooth through this section now, just using all the circuit and just trying to scrub as little speed as possible, really small moves with the steering wheel, and let's just roll along through this section. So as we navigate through this next section of corners and the little chicane, we come down to what you would imagine would be a braking area, but I'm just going to be flat out through here. No lift with the pedal at all, but really just trying to spot your line where you're going to start turning in. I do run a little bit wide through this section. You kind of come a lot closer to the inside barrier, and then again we're just maintaining speed through this section. No need to cover the brake pedal because we're not going to be doing any braking through that section at all. So we're fast approaching probably the hardest section of the track as far as I'm concerned. We're going to cover the brake here because we're going to make tiny adjustments. Whether I brake or not depends on what line I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to shift down through the gearbox into 4th gear and just try and hug that corner really tightly, but don't take too much grass. And again, we're just going to try and run nice and smooth through this section, and just over the rise we're going to start to brake, coming down through the paddles. So I'm in 4th gear, remember, so we're going to go from 4th gear into 2nd gear on the exit, quickly round and then into 3rd gear and across the line. So there we go, just a few tenths away, and you can see the techniques that I'm using in some of the corners and where best to use the sequential gearbox and where you're changing down through the gears. So let's take a little drive around the circuit, and I'll point out a few of the lines and a few of the techniques I'm using through the corners. So as we start the lap, we're going to have the sequential gearbox in 2nd gear, and we're just going to take a wide line as best we can around this corner, and we're going to be changed down using the paddle shifters into 1st. Start to accelerate nice and hard, and you'll see I just sort of put it out of 2nd gear and then back into 2nd gear. I'm not actually going from 1st because I've come down in the paddles. It's still going to be in 2nd, so I just come out of 2nd and into 2nd from being in 1st. So here we go. So we're going to be up into 4th gear here, and as you can see, we're sort of going to roll down at this sort of angle, and we're going to come as close to this wall as we could possibly get without hitting it. Yeah, so here we are then, without hitting the wall, and you're sort of going to be coming straight through, and you really just chuck the car in. And you're sort of wanting to chuck it in to a point where you're getting this line, and it's nice and flat through here, and you're sort of still throwing it in really, because the car bounces around here, and then you'll feel like a flat, and then you just want to be throwing it the other way really, or getting the wheel nice and straight again to come right along this line here. So carry on all the way up in 4th gear. Get some speed back. Yeah, I'll just turn that down because I can barely hear myself think. Yeah, so I've already just hit that bollard and lost 3% of my rear wing, which you definitely don't want to do. So anyway, we're going to be maxed up in 4th gear, and just as the barrier runs out, there on the left hand side of the screen, we're just going to take a drop down on the sequential gearbox, on the paddle shift, into 3rd gear, and just nice and tentative on the brake, come down into 3rd, and then just really lift off the brake and turn the car in. And again, we're using this sort of technique where we're just chucking the car in round here, trying to get it to grip, and then back on the power. And again, I'm in 4th gear already on my sequential gearbox, and I'm in 3rd. So to come into 4th gear, I'm just going to come out and then back into 4th gear. once the time's right. I mean, I'm not going to change gear now, probably till I'm round the corner, so we'll drop it down into third, and then as soon as we're sort of round this corner, around this area, we'll be going from fourth into fifth gear, and it's going to bounce around this first little section just as the car struggles for grip, and we're just aiming for this house here on the left hand side, and we want to be at the apex at the house, because this is the only line that you can take through this corner flat out. You're sort of aiming to get the right hand tyre on the curb here, hugging the curb, which lines us up then for the next corner when we come across and get the left curb with the left tyre, and again flat out, just all the way down here, just hugging the right hand side here again, and then coming over to the left hand side, the line of least resistance all the way through here. And you should be up to around 218 miles an hour before we come through this next little chicane, which again is just a little flick left and a flick right. No changes. We're just going to stay flat out on the accelerator pedal now, all the way through this corner. Obviously not while I'm showing you, but you're absolutely flat out, and you're sort of aiming for this billboard, the larger of the billboards, and you see that on the right hand side there's two lampposts. Now I'll come back a sec, because this is what we've got on the, this is how I envisage it anyway. On the right hand side now there's one lamppost just where my windscreen wiper is, the top of the windscreen wiper, and then we've got these billboards right in front of us, these shield billboards, and then there's another lamppost which is on the right hand side. Now I'm aiming for this shield billboard right in front of me, but that's sort of my turning point, and then I know that then I'm going to be aiming for the next lamppost really. So I'm coming all the way out here, and I know I need to be aiming across now for this other lamppost. Flat out here, trying not to scrub as much, any speed at all really, and just trying to hit this curb. That you really want to hit that apex really to get the best line, and then you just flat out. Let's change down a bit. And you don't come off the accelerator at all through any of that, just stay in fifth gear. And again, just a line of least resistance through here, still in fifth gear all the way through. Should be about 202 around here. And then just a little flick across, just hardly turning the wheel at all really. Getting ready for the toughest section on the circuit as far as I'm concerned. Just slow it down again. So as I come through here, I'm not coming off the accelerator at all. I'm aiming for around this fifth bollard, fourth bollard, to just drop down into fourth gear without lifting the accelerator at all. So I'm going to carry on through in fourth gear, and now I'm just going to take a tiny lift and maybe just a dab of the brake pedal, and we're using this technique to throw the car in. You can't run too much curb there, but you can take a little bit without taking a penalty. And then we're going to stay in fourth gear all the way to the line, or to the next corner anyway, which is our huge braking corner. Now you can see the undulation here, and just as we come up over the rise of this little crest here, this is where we're just going to start braking around that little crack in the ground. So braking all the way down, using the paddle shifters down to second gear, and then just on this last corner we're going to drop down to the first gear and just press a little bit harder than we have been doing on the brake pedal to get the car to bite and turn in. And then we're going to try and keep on the power Remember, we're in 4th gear here, so we're going to have to come out and across and down into 2nd gear and then just power it to the line. And it really is, if you can get the car to work and you can just enjoy being smooth with the wheel and at the points where you need to be smooth, and then fast with the wheel where you need to be fast to keep the car stable. I'll show you a few clips in a second just how hard it is to get this first corner right. It's probably the hardest one on the circuit to keep flat through this section and get it right. So don't for 1 minute think that a lap is achieved just on a one-off. It's many laps at trying to nail it to get it perfect. And I still think there's a little bit more time in this car, maybe a few more tenths, but I'll certainly be interested in having a go at increasing my my time using the LM version of this car, or the LM version that's at the top of the leaderboard in this for this lap. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope there's a few points in there that maybe helped out, especially using the gearbox and the paddle shifters. If you're no good at using the heel toe method, it's certainly not something that I particularly enjoy using, especially using twisting your feet around all the time. It just feels like such an effort when I'm so used to using the paddle shifts. But to use this method in some of the older cars, it really does feel a little bit easier. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed the video. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. I don't have loads of content coming out all the time, so when I do get a chance to put a video together, I do try and get the best out of it as I can to help you guys with the tuning and any other techniques to get faster, really. Rather than just leave the video there, I thought I'd spend a little bit of time looking at some of the setup changes that I make and actually showing you why I make those changes. So I'm just going to quickly bang a fast lap in here. I'll fast forward it right to the end, just to get a banker lap in due to setting a faster lap in the LM car. But I thought I'd really just show you some of those changes and so you can actually see the differences. So enjoy the rest of the video, guys, and I'll catch you near the end. So there we've got a little banker lap in, a 243.9. Now we all know, I know that I'm about 4 tenths off my personal best, but let's just run the same thing. We'll restart the session. We'll keep the ghost that we've just posted, and what I'm going to do, just to prove to a point, is increase the camber. So we're not going to go crazy, just something that you would usually sort of get about 2 degrees on each wheel, just to show you the difference. So already I think I took that quite nicely. He's just pulling away from me now. You see, I catch him in the corner slightly. So it's got about 2 miles an hour extra on me at the moment. Doesn't seem like much, but when you're trying to make up those tenths, so you see the lap difference then, and I thought that was a pretty comprehensive lap, but just that little difference in the cambers is giving us a 7/10 difference in our lap time. So we'll still keep the same ghost. And then let's go back to the tuning. And we're going to bring these tyre pressures down. Not crazy too far, just something like they might be. Slightly softer on the rears. Let's save that. And then see what happens. Alright. Not consistently. So as you can see, it's just, that's a terrible first sector. 5/10 down already. See, we're just doing 217 there, whereas previously we're doing 218. Should be reaching 226 down here. 225. All the way down to 191 there, rather than about 196. I'll just pause it there. I mean, looking at my telemetry down here, I mean, you don't see this on here because you haven't finished the lap, but rather than lose the ghost again, I want to do another experiment. But 45.2 was all I was able to do there, and rather than a 44.7, 44.6 would be my fastest in the previous setup. and then a 102.8, I mean, that's nearly 7/10 away, so you've already lost a full second at least. So let's have a look at doing another test. So return back to the setup, and I'll return those tyre pressures back to where they should be. And we're just going to use, rather than using the manual shifter here, we're just going to use the paddle shifts, just to show you what difference it makes. It's not huge, but it's certainly noticeable. And already it's noticeable, isn't it? It's noticeable every time there's a gear change. And more so on the start-finish line when we're setting off, because we're building up all that speed. So cross the line with far more speed. So still doing 218 here, look. The car's definitely the same car. We get 226 down the hill. And there's no gear changes here, so this is just all out and out pace. That's a nice line through there. You can see I'm gaining on him now. But again, you see I lose it all on the acceleration phases. So you can see quite happily there that in the mid-state phase, where there's not really much gear changing going on, you can see that the time's negligible. But through the acceleration phases, and if you've got a lot of them, you know, it's going to make a difference. So I certainly think you're at a disadvantage if you haven't got a manual gearbox. Obviously, from the video you can see you don't need to know how to do the clutch and, you know, left foot braking and right foot braking and the heel and toe method. You can quite happily use these. You're just going to have to be a bit more familiar with the gearbox, where you're moving from like 5th through to 3rd, or from 5th down to 2nd. You've got to work out where you're changing your gears and stuff. So I hope that's been a bit more helpful, seeing the differences that some of the setup changes can make. Obviously there's numerous other things that I could adjust to show you the difference, but they're just two of them. The tyre pressures and the cambers both have such an impact on top speed and acceleration, and I hope you find that useful. So as always, thanks for watching and ciao for now.